Domestic terrorism, violent criminal acts or threats that create fear and have a point of furthering an ideological goal are on the rise in America. And according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which actually tracks such things, Oregon is leading the way. That is a bad thing. The center found in 2021 73 domestic terror plots or attacks across the country. 18 of those were in Oregon, the most anywhere, and most of those were around the Portland area. The next highest was New York with 7 plots or attacks. Against that grim backdrop, auditors with Oregon Secretary of State issued a report today saying the state needs to do more to protect itself against future domestic terrorism. Oregon has a long record of domestic terror or significant incidents. Some of the more recent history involves 1984 in the Dalles, where members of the Rajneesh movement contaminated salad bars of 10 restaurants as they tried to alter an election. 751 people got sick, 45 were hospitalized. In the 1990s, it was the Animal Liberation Front and the Earth Liberation Front burning research facilities and toppling a BPA transmission tower. In 2016, Ammon Bundy and his supporters took over the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in southeast Oregon and held it for 5 weeks. In September of 2020, a man on the far right supporting a pro-Trump rally in downtown Portland was shot and killed by a man on the far left, an Antifa supporter. In December that same year, far-right protesters entered Oregon's closed state capitol after a lawmaker let them in. There were many arrests along the way there, but no one in any of those incidents was charged with a state crime in Oregon for domestic terrorism. Why not? Because that crime does not exist here. It's something that state auditors highlighted today.
Despite Oregon's high-risk profile in this area, we are one of only 16 states that do not have specific legislation criminalizing domestic terrorism and violent extremism. So that is one of the recommendations we're intending for legislators to consider as they address this high-risk area going forward.
Other findings from the audit included criticism of something called the Oregon Homeland Security Council, which sounds like a powerful group helping keep us safe, but the auditors found it has no statewide strategy with specific measurable outcomes for countering violent extremism risks and activities. Auditors also said police should get more training and agencies should define who will handle what when it comes to domestic terrorism. One person not surprised by any of this is Billy J. Williams. He's the former United States Attorney for the District of Oregon who served under both President Obama and President Trump. He's now in private practice in Central Oregon and talked about domestic terror with me today.
There's a lot of activity on the internet that is of concern, but you always keep in mind people have First Amendment rights to believe in whatever ideology they want to believe in, whether it's a failed ideology like white supremacy or an ideology like that motivates people to be part of the Antifa movement.
He said it's only a problem when they do things that violate the law. He was in office during the takeover of the Malheur Refuge and personally was down there overseeing the federal response. He said the lack of a federal domestic terrorism law is a big problem.
What's missing is a tool, if you will, in the prosecutor's toolbox to bring, where appropriate, federal domestic terrorism prosecutions. That's missing. There's been a lot of discussion about what that would look like, how it would be defined, but that's up to Congress to take that up.
And is that why somebody like Ammon Bundy faced relatively minor charges?
Yeah, there were only so many tools in the toolbox for both the state and us on the federal side of the House.
He also said Malik Muhammad, who was sentenced yesterday to 10 years in prison, would be a perfect example of someone who could be charged with domestic terrorism if that law existed, either federally or on the state level. Muhammad traveled from Indianapolis to Portland to take part in the violent riots in the summer of 2020 and was accused of throwing Molotov cocktails at police and smashing the windows of the Oregon Historical Society.
Just curious, based on your experience, do you think that it emboldens the actors on the far right and the far left to do more of these things because they know there's no federal law against it?
Yeah, I think it does. Just like I think in terms of the criminal violence on the street level in Portland and other major cities in the United States has ramped up again because of positions taken around the country and not enforcing the law. The rule of law matters. People need to be held accountable, and if they know they're not going to be, well, we see what the result is.
Sometimes domestic terrorism comes from highly charged political battles over scarce resources. The next flashpoint to watch for is the Klamath Basin, where several years of water shortages led to threats of farmers actually taking over a dam at Klamath Lake to force a release of the water. Williams went there and met with everyone involved to try to calm things down.
I mean, essentially what we did was develop a list of potential charges that if someone took over the dam there right in town, like there were rumors of that could happen. And I explained to folks that I'm not going to tell them, what to believe or how to act, but I can tell them what they would be charged with if the dam was taken over. And so we put a one-page list, what the charges are, statutory reference, and I provided it to those who were expressing, a lot of concern, shook their hands and said, I'm just letting you know, face to face, this is what you will be looking at if you violate a federal statute. And so what I'm asking you is not to do it. Work with the land management and water agencies, Bureau of Reclamation, work with the tribe, honor their rights.
It has worked, at least so far, but this summer may bring more trouble. It will certainly bring another crisis over the water. There's just not enough. Let's hope that everyone keeps their cool. By the way, you may have noticed one big Oregon incident not on that earlier list of terror events, the attempted bombing of the Christmas tree lighting at Pioneer Square back in 2010. A man named Mohammed tried to detonate what he thought was a van packed with explosives as 10,000 people, including me, gathered to greet the season. It did not explode because the FBI made sure the van was packed with harmless materials. We did not include that one because the FBI said Mohammed had communicated with an al-Qaeda terrorist and others internationally, and so because of that was part of an international terror plot, not a domestic one. I have to say, I was surprised when I was reporting on that story to learn there is no domestic terrorism law in Oregon or at the national federal level. There should be. It's common sense, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, I respect and appreciate anyone who has a passionate belief and is willing to lobby and debate others to try and convince them that they are correct. And I've covered many passionate protest marches in the streets of Portland and felt real pride for living in a city with so many people who care about social justice. But I was also at the Malheur takeover a couple of times while that was underway. While there was plenty of talking, there was also a lot of rifles and other guns. That was not a discussion. That was an armed occupation trying to force the government to do what they wanted. In the end, Ammon Bundy and a few other leaders were not convicted, but that does not mean they were right. There's a certain type of person in the Northwest that sometimes seems to feel that they are the only smart ones, the only ones with the gift of moral certainty, the only ones really looking out for the good of the people. That belief seems to empower them to take actions like torching a lumber company in Oregon or an animal inspection facility in Olympia or trying to burn down the federal courthouse in Portland. That's not democracy. That's anarchy, and it threatens all of us. And there should be a law against that. That's my opinion. What do you think? Send me an email at thestory@kgw.com or give me a call. Leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.